Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. It had been another exhausting day. Once again, my team and I had worked late into the night. Crunch time always came with this level of intensity, and as the lead programmer, I felt responsible for staying every step of the way. More often than not, I was the last to leave the office. Tonight was no exception. After securing the building, I headed out, crossing the dimly lit parking lot to my red BMW 650i coupe, ready for the short drive home. My thoughts were still on the project. We'd made significant progress, with bug numbers finally dropping after a tough week. Hundreds of issues remained, but the pace of discovery was slowing, and the team was keeping up with fixes. In 2 weeks, we have a gold master ready to ship. As I walked to my car, I realized I wasn't alone. The sound of quickening footsteps reached me. Lost in my thoughts, I hadn't turned on my usual music, which would have drowned out the noise. Turning to see who was there, I froze as a gun came into view, pointed directly at me. Instinct kicked in. I ducked, but it wasn't fast enough. A flash came from the gun, and pain tore through my chest, just above my heart, fracturing my shoulder. The force knocked me back against the trunk of a nearby car, and I collapsed into a sitting position. Through the haze of pain, I saw the shooter framed by the glow of the parking lot streetlights. Another flash lit up the night, or maybe there were several. A bullet slammed into my lowest rib on the same side, and the world began to blur. My vision darkened, and I fought to keep my eyes open as the shooter drew closer. In that moment, I knew it was the end. My final thoughts were of Sophie, my wife, and Amelia, my daughter. I prayed they could forgive me for not being there for them. I regretted the years I spent working through countless crunch times instead of being with my family. Voices shouted from somewhere in the distance, familiar voices that I couldn't quite place. It didn't matter. The gun fired once more, biting into my left leg. Then I watched as the shooter turned and ran away. Moments later, I felt a familiar face lean over me. Nora, our graphic designer, appeared and spoke to me, though I couldn't hear her. Then I saw Daniel, our assistant producer, and Steve, the AI programmer, both of whom looked down at me with concern. As the world began to blur and fade, I fought to stay awake, focusing on Nora's face until I could no longer keep my eyes open. The next thing I knew, I was looking into the eyes of someone I didn't know, feeling a searing pain in my chest. As everything faded to black again, I saw the paddles in his hands. I had died, but somehow he had brought me back. Waking up, the first thing I felt was pain, not the intense agony from before, but still enough to make my body ache. I opened my eyes and saw the source. A nurse was holding my leg, flexing it back and forth, working out the muscles in the leg that had been shot. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, and all that came out was a scratchy grunt. The nurse quickly dropped my leg onto the bed and looked at me as she noticed my eyes. Hours passed. The doctors had seen me. Nurses gave me ice chips, and slowly I began to feel better. Well, at least I could talk again, but my strength was gone. It took everything I had just to lift my arm, let alone do anything else. At least I was alive. I learned that I'd been in this long-term facility for 10 months. My only visitor had been Amelia, but she hadn't come by in 6 months. Her phone number was the one on record as my next of kin. They couldn't tell me anything about Sophie or the circumstances of my shooting. The notes on my file also requested that the police be contacted upon my waking, and sure enough, they were my first visitors. Mr. William Blackwood asked the older of the two detectives. I nodded. He introduced himself as Detective Ethan Hayes with his partner, Dario Bossi, and asked if I could answer a few questions about my shooting. I agreed and recounted what I remembered of that night. Once that was over, the questions took an unexpected turn. Mr. Blackwood, how long had you suspected your wife of having an affair? Detective Bossi asked, drawing a sharp look from his partner. I sputtered, having an affair. What are you talking about? Where's my wife? She'll tell you she's not having an affair with anyone. I apologize for my partner's question. Hayes interjected. But I regret to inform you that she was indeed having an affair with Isaac Gall. Do you know him? Sophie having an affair. It made no sense. She was my whole world, especially after Amelia was born, and I had been hers. It had always been the three of us. I worked so hard for them, so they could have everything they wanted. I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of her having an affair. The name Isaac Gall was familiar, but I couldn't place him immediately. I recognized the name, but I began. Then it clicked. He was my daughter's middle school English teacher. Yes, that's how we think they met. Hayes confirmed. Did you know he lost that job? I shook my head. No, he started an affair with an 18-year-old at the high school. Hayes continued. It broke school district rules, but not the law. He lost his job and struggled to find another teaching position. Eventually, his father passed away, and he ended up running the local coffee shop. G Cafe, I said, thinking about the place my wife loved to get her coffee from. Yes, he replied. We think this is where your wife and Gall met again. That would be right. She loved the coffee in that place. I'd rather drink sewer water, though. I told them that would be the opinion of most of the town, I would say. He barely broke even, we discovered. I still don't believe my wife is having an affair with this man. I can see how they would see each other regularly. She would go there often, but an affair seems to be a big stretch to me. Okay, let's try another line of questioning, and we'll come back to that. Does your house have a security system? Yes. What kind of system features basic stuff, really alarms on the garage front and back doors, motion detectors in the downstairs rooms, all with a direct connection to the alarm company we use? No cameras. No, I didn't like the idea of them having a record of my life sitting on their servers. Too many security breaches with these internet companies to feel safe. Why? Did you install any cameras yourself? No. The only cameras in the house would be my digital cellular camera and the ones built into our laptops. Again, why are you asking? There are cameras throughout your house. We recovered a DVR system hidden in the basement that had recorded nearly a month's worth of footage leading up to your shooting. Who put them there? We and your daughter assumed it had been you, that you suspected your wife was having an affair. She couldn't figure out how you knew, though. She didn't suspect. I didn't either. Until you told me, I thought my wife loved me as much as I love her. Wasn't me. So, who was it? And what did you find? Proof of the affair. Proof that your wife and her lover planned the attack on you. Phone records showed that you called your wife about half an hour before you left your office. Immediately after that call, she called Mr. Gall. From the video we have, it was to inform him you'd be finishing up at work soon, and to get down there. Hell, she wanted me dead. Why? You have videos of her with him. Images of my wife with another man. With that weasel of a teacher ran through my head. I felt nauseous. I also felt anger. She was willing to kill me for him. For our things. She wanted me dead. So she could keep the house and the car. She saw more worth in them than my life. My love for her died with that realization. She had convinced herself that you were having an affair as well. And she wanted to take everything from the marriage, including the $1 million life insurance policy she had on you. Life insurance policy. He couldn't mean my work one. I'm not sure I even mentioned that to her, but I don't remember signing any paperwork for one recently. What life insurance policy? The one you took out nearly 2 years ago. He told me. 2 years. Just how long had her affair been going on? My stomach lurched again. It didn't matter. She did it. She's dead to me. Or she should be dead to me. I don't remember doing that. I have one through work. I think that's worth 2 years' salary. On my base salary, no bonuses. That's $220,000. We found that out as well. He replied. Okay, so where is the wife and her lover? And do you know how long had they been together? For the first question, the earliest we can track by is 7 months before you got shot. So 7 or 8 months, probably not longer, 8 months. But the life insurance policy was 2 years old. Did that mean there were others? Or did that mean the life insurance that she was looking out for her and Amelia should something happen to me? I wonder if she would clear that up for me and tell me how long, how many affairs she'd had, but that first needed to know where she was. Your wife was very nervous when we interviewed her. Enough that she became the prime suspect. When we got her phone records, and we discovered she'd been talking a lot to Mr. Gull, including the night of the shooting, we interviewed her again. This time down at the station. We also brought in Mr. Gull. Their stories matched a little too well, but we had no evidence yet to link them conclusively to the attack on you. Okay, so you let them go. We did and planned to have them followed. However, they took off straight from the station. Mr. Gull managed to escape to Mexico. Shot himself rather than allow himself to be arrested and deported. He left a confession. Was my wife with him? She hasn't been seen since she left the station that day. We don't know where she is. You're still looking for her? Yes, but there hasn't been a sighting of her in all this time. No accessing her funds, nothing from her phone. No relatives are admitting to her having contacted her. She just vanished. My daughter. Do you know where my daughter is? She's not come to see me for a while, I'm told. She hasn't heard from her either. As for where she is, she moved out west for university. I'll check with the nurse on the desk to make sure they have that contact information. My guess is they do, but it will take her time to arrange a flight home. Did out west mean she went to the University of Washington? I wondered. She talked about going there. It had been where her grandfather, my dad, had gone, and where I had intended going until, while I put together a game and sold it. That led to a job offer. Just for a year. I told myself and my parents, we finished that game, and it sold really well. My royalties off that game would have paid for my studies 2 times when all was said and done. I rolled into another game. This one based on an idea I had pitched. My parents tried to get me to go to university before it was too late, but I couldn't leave my baby behind. I wanted to see my game across the finish line. 2 years later, we finished the game. I met Sophie and Amelia was on the way. Marriage followed and university didn't seem so important anymore. Well, for me at least. Sophie went back and finished her computer science degree. We'd met when I had been volunteered to give a speech on game development at her university. I wish now that I'd listened to my parents and gone back to university. No, that wasn't true because then I wouldn't have Amelia. All the pain in the world was worth it to have her in my life. Did her boyfriend go with her? Do you know? Please tell me he didn't. Boyfriend. Does this mean he didn't go with her? Yes, her boyfriend, Ryan Carter. I don't know. His name hasn't come up in the investigation. Surely they would have talked to him. Amelia seemed to spend every moment she could with him. I kept quiet about my dislike for him. Sophie had thought him to be harmless and a phase and not to worry. But maybe if they didn't talk to him, then maybe it had been a phase and she had gotten over him before all this happened. I just not noticed her wrapped up in the overtime and the rush to get the game done. I guess I have to wait and ask her then. Seems that would be best. So I guess you guys have 2 mysteries to solve now. Maybe 3. How so? 1. Find out what happened to my wife. 2. Who put the cameras in my house. 3. What happened with Ryan Carter? He laughed lightly. That last one is for you, I think. But yes, we need answers now to the first 2. We'll be in touch, Mr. Blackwood. New beginnings. The next morning, they transferred me from the long-term care facility for COMA patients back to the hospital to begin my rehab. The nurses seemed happy about that. Seemed all their patients usually left in a wooden box. Waiting at the nurse's station on the ward, they took me was my daughter. Tears rolling down her face as she saw me coming in. Her face told of joy at seeing me and disbelief at seeing me actually awake and alert again. Finally, the joy won out, and she rushed over to me. She kissed my cheek, held my hand, and told me how happy seeing me awake made her feel. A nurse had her return to the station while they got me situated in my room. Seeing her alone, drove home that the detectives hadn't lied to me, that my wife had had an affair, and that she and her lover had planned to kill me. Up until seeing her, I drifted back into believing they'd got it wrong somehow, that finding her would clear it all up. We'd be together. A loving couple again with an amazing daughter as proof of that love. "How have you been?" I asked as soon as she entered the room. "Okay, I guess. I didn't take the shortcut to hear that you did. I lived through the year. You just took a nap. The worst part, that being Sleeping Beauty for a year didn't help you in the looks department." I laughed, my first one since I had woken up. "How are you really? How have you coped with everything?" "Good, Dad." "Really? It's you that should be answering the how are you question, not me. As for how have I coped with everything? Well, Nora from your office helped the most. She moved in with me at the house and basically got me through Thanksgiving and Christmas last year, then was there for graduation and helped get me to university. She fought social services to become my legal guardian, and her paying rent to live in the house is what keeps the bills paid. She really came through for us in a big way. I always liked Nora. I'm glad you had someone there for you." "What happened to Ryan?" Amelia's face soured at the mention of him. "He didn't like me spending time at the hospital instead of with him. He kept pestering me to use the empty house time for us to get together. Then a week after you got shot, he was gone. Never heard from him again. His best friend told me he lost his job and moved back in with his parents. But I know that to be a lie. His parents died. He lived with his grandmother until he left school, then got his own apartment. I asked at the Staples about him weeks later. The manager told me he just phoned them and said he couldn't come back. Loser, you're so better off without him. Why didn't you tell me that at the time, Dad? Your mother convinced me that if I said anything, you'd attach yourself more to him. Screw that bitch. I wasted too much time with that loser. Dad, next time tell me you don't like." "Okay," I nodded. "Sure." "No, I mean it. Mom, she's a bitch. I bet she like losers like him. I want your opinion, good or bad. Please." "I will." "Honey. So, is there anyone new in your life?" "Not really. There is one that might be something. He only just got the courage to talk to me, and then I got a call and had to jump on a plane. So when I go back, we'll see where it leads or if anything happens at all." "What are you studying?" "Computers. Unlike the building, engineering side of it though. Not what you do. I built a digital scale, just a pressure sensor and 3 LEDs to show the number. But it worked. First time too." I smiled at that, then soured. Her mother had excelled at school too. Hearing Amelia brought back memories of Sophie coming home to talk up her successes at school. "What's wrong, Dad?" Amelia asked, concern painted over her face. "Just old memories, honey. Of that bitch of a mother of mine." She spat. I nodded. Yes, she did well at school too. "I think you get your smarts from her. I get nothing from her, Dad. You're the smartest person I know. If I got my smarts from anyone, it's you. The only thing that bitch is good for is rotting in hell." "What happened after I was shot? Or is this all from finding out she tried to kill me?" "Well, her trying to kill you is enough. But between when you got shot and when she disappeared, she changed. She changed a lot. The first week or so, she was the doting wife and mother, spending every waking moment at the hospital. Except for school, I was there with her. So I know. We ate at the hospital. I did homework at the hospital. She slept at the hospital too, sending me home. So I had fresh clothes and showered for school the next day. When you didn't wake up after that first week, she changed. She dressed a little revealing. Would say she was going to the hospital, but frequently. I'd show up there after school, and she wouldn't be there. The police started to interview everyone close to you. Nora told me they started with everyone at work. Your friends at your Sunday morning pickup soccer game. Finally, they got to me, and then Mom. After they talked with Mom, She seemed on edge. Always seemed to be looking over her shoulder. She wouldn't drive the same way anywhere 2 times in a row. That shit made me late for school a couple of times when she convinced herself she was being followed. She sighed, looked around the room, then continued. When the police asked her to come in for a follow-up interview, she had trouble putting the phone back on the receiver because hands shook so badly. Yet she still went. After she'd taken me to school, I walked home that day. I thought at the time that she'd gone to the hospital after the police and lost track of time. But when she didn't come home, I started to worry. I called the hospital, and they told me you'd had no visitors that day. I had my laptop open looking up the number for the local police station when Nora called. She always called on nights she couldn't pop into the hospital to see you back then. I told her the bitch was missing, and she insisted on coming to our house. She left work to come over. I'm pretty sure she took a lot of shit for it. She slept in the spare bed that night, and together, we went to the police station the next morning. The police came and searched the house. Nora stood there with me. They found these hidden cameras in a box in the basement that recorded the contents. She told me, then paused, taking time to figure out how best to ask the question. I knew what she wanted to know, so I saved her from asking. I didn't install the cameras. I've no idea who did that. I wish I did. I wish they had warned me of what she had planned, or warned me before that of her affair. Did you know him? He was my teacher back in middle school, but I hadn't seen him since I moved up to the high school. So the police found the videos and knew about your mom. What happened next? I asked. Well, they took away the storage device, but didn't tell us what was on it. The detective on the case told us to call him immediately if she contacted me, then left. A uniformed policewoman, and for me that they would contact social services and let them know I was alone. Nora stepped in then and said she wasn't alone. Nora moved in that day. Your company managed to get a lawyer for her, and they dealt with social services. For days left before I turned 18, social services didn't care. They just gave Nora the paperwork to be my guardian for the next few days and kicks us out of the office. Didn't offer any counseling or anything. Someone was there to look after me, and they washed their hands of me. It was pathetic, Dad. I could feel her hurt there. The anger. I'm sure some of it was being cast off by the people that should have been her safety net. By the one who, when all else fails, come to the rescue and look after you. But her real anger was the sense of being abandoned by her loving parents. She just deflected that anger. After all, I'd been shot and had no control over what had happened, and she knew that. But still, I wasn't there when she needed me. Her mother, she had run away, fleeing the results of her actions. I wondered if she even gave a thought for the daughter she had left behind. I'm sorry, honey. I wish I should. I would have been there for you if I could. I told her, tears rolling down my tears at the thoughts of what my daughter had to go through. My own guilt at not being there for her mixed with relief that Nora had been. Oh, Daddy, she said, her own tears flowing now. Daddy, I know you'd have been there if you could. Knowing you fought to live, fought to come back to us. It helped. You didn't give up, Dad. And so I couldn't give up. Nora helped, though. She moved in. She paid rent too, to ensure there was money for the bills. She saw me through the last of school, helped me pick the college, and even came out with me for orientation. I'm so glad you had someone to help. Honey, where is Nora now? I wondered. Nora had been my work wife, sort of. I guess I kind of had a few of them. I ran the programmers, assigned their tasks, and monitoring their progress. She designed the game's user interface and assigned the graphic artists. We discussed what we could and couldn't do. We'd matchmake programmers and graphic artists for the tasks. Knowing for the best results, you had to have people that worked well together working together. After all, the late nights of crunch time created enough stress that you didn't want to add personality conflicts if you can help it. But you also wanted to ensure the best possible product. Nora and I worked to ensure that together. She had been my sounding board at work as I had been hers. It had all be above board and professional. She's at work. She texted me that you've been moved from the long-term facility. I was told you had woken up, and she went there this morning. She'll be by in the evening. I should tell you she still lives in our house. Okay, she would check up on you once a week for me. I wouldn't have gone to Yuba if she hadn't agreed to that. Honey, you need to do what's right for you. If that school was the one for you, then you should go. No matter what, your grandfather would be proud you went to his alma mater. He wanted me to go there. I just found life got in the way of that. Our conversation got put on hold then when a doctor turned up to examine me and sign off on my starting physical therapy. After he left, I noticed that she pulled my daughter into a room. I assumed to talk about next steps, the kind of support I'd have if released, and that kind of stuff. I told him I had no idea what would be at home for me, explaining my daughter was now in university on the other side of the country, and that my wife and her lover were the reason for me being here in the first place. It left me with my thoughts and emotions for company. I felt a wave of seething anger for my wife, leaving our daughter to fend for herself. Stupid really, because Nora was an adult. She could take care of herself, or could under normal circumstances. Losing both parents wasn't that. I still had trouble believing she'd had an affair, let alone try to kill me for him. I felt like demanding proof, demanding to see the videos they claimed to have to prove that to me, to allow me to let go of the idea that the police and my daughter were wrong. Even though logically, the fact she had run and wasn't here showed her guilt. If she cheated, why did she do it? Not being there enough for her. She'd always said she understood, and the long breaks after the project shipped were good times. She knew we had been getting close to the next one. By the timesheets, this one would be a month long. I could extend that with the 3 weeks I hadn't taken, giving us all of December and January together possibly. Maybe that was the reason why she tried to kill me now. When I'd be off work, she wouldn't be able to sneak out in him. Did she fall in love with him? I wasn't there as much as some would be. So maybe me not being there as much left her vulnerable to his attention. Then, given his more limited prospects, they decided to try and keep everything we had. Problem with that, it didn't sound like my wife. I had to admit, unless she was found, I would never know why. Even if they caught her, she might not feel inclined to tell me anyway. Maybe it was best to focus on getting better, looking to the future and making sure I was there for Amelia whenever she needed me. Amelia returned from talking to the doctor, and our conversation turned to more mundane things. She talked about her courses and projects at school, where her friends had ended up for college and the new friends she made in Seattle. She talked of attending Washington Huskies football games and trips to the Seattle Thunderbirds later. Nora joined us, and she added gossip from the office update on the game we've been working on when I shot in the new game, a sequel to my last game. That game, it seemed, had lots of problems. Daniel had left to take up a producer role in the Bay Area, and exposed who did the real management work on our team. We all knew it. Now management had proof of what I told them, though Mike, the producer, blamed Daniel's replacement at assistant producer position in the time he had to put in to train him, a guy he picked and who had never worked in games before coming from a medical software company. Nora wanted to quit, go do her own thing. That last item had me wondering if she had stuck around just for me and to support Amelia. I would need to talk to her when Amelia wasn't around. A few hours later, we were all yawning and decided to call it a night. As they headed out of the room, I realized one thing they hadn't asked. Amelia, did you come straight here from the airport? Yes, Dad. Where is your suitcase? At the nurse's station. Okay. Love you. See you tomorrow. I love you too, Nora said with a smile. Amelia smiled at hearing it and walked out of the room, missing Nora blowing me a kiss before exiting herself before I had time to react. Recovery turned out. I woke at just the right time for Amelia. It had been a day before the reading week prior to heading into exams. She had even talked to one of her professors and managed to get her exams proctored through a friend at the state university, an hour's drive away. It would mean some late-night exams as they insisted on her doing them at the same time as her classmates. But she could do them here and remain with me. She spent days with me, her laptop, and course textbooks in hand. I quizzed her when she asked. I talked through solutions that I would use in some of the situations presented. I had fun. Ignoring why I was in the hospital was an added benefit, and felt Amelia and I getting closer than we'd ever been. The physical therapy kicked my butt in those first 2 weeks. I walked on shaky legs down a channel created by 2 bars I could use to hold myself up if I needed at the end. It got me released in time for Thanksgiving at home, which Amelia and I ate at a local hotel. Nora had headed out of town, gone to visit her parents, sister and brother in Florida. I expected that entering the house for the first time would feel like coming home. It didn't. It felt like I'd walked into a crime scene, seeing the ghosts of my wife's crimes in every room. With Nora gone, I slept in the guest bedroom rather than the master. Nora's scent was more comforting than anything else in that house other than my daughter. I knew that I'd have to sell this house. A fresh start, a complete break from the memories of all the good times with my wife and the ghosts of what might have occurred in these rooms by her. The day after, I called a real estate agent and started the process of putting the house on the market. He warned me it was a slow market and the slow time of the year, so I should expect it to take some time to sell a house, maybe even into the new year. Monday after Thanksgiving, I went to work and arranged to spend time working from home. I'd just be a programmer on the game. My job would be to work through the bug database, coordinating with the person assigned the bug via Skype, and then looking to fix it if they were agreeable to that. I knew most of them would be, unless they knew exactly what the problem was and had a solution for it. Then offloading it would be a blessing to them. Tuesday, Nora brought home a console and a work laptop for me to use, and after my morning trip to the hospital for physio, I began work. It felt good to be back to work, even if I wasn't yet back at work. The afternoon proved to be a lot of fun, sitting there looking for bugs and talk through the problems and solutions with my daughter. Wednesday, we got up early and dropped Amelia off at the airport for her flight back to school. We had a tearful goodbye. I felt like my life was leaving again. She didn't really want to go either, having just got me back. But she would be back soon for Christmas, and I suddenly felt like a change of scenery could be good for me. So maybe I would follow her out there after I'd found a new job. I returned to work properly a week before Christmas, the day after the Christmas party that I attended with Nora as my date. No, we hadn't got together. She had a long-term boyfriend. Though, strangely, he never came around the house, and she never spent the night at his place. Christmas holiday was good. Again, just Amelia and me. But we enjoyed ourselves. We even drove into Philadelphia for a Flyers game on the 27th, a present from Amelia to me. But it could have equally been for me to her. In the new year, she returned to school, and Nora returned from Florida and a trip to her parents. My physio was down to once a week. Midway through the week also brought a visit from the police. They returned the storage and control device for the cameras that had been in the house, along with the cameras themselves. They had cloned the videos to their systems, which was all the evidence they needed. They had tracked the system to a purchase made from Costco in Baltimore that had then been returned and sold to a discount warehouse chain, and whoever bought it there paid in cash, and the trail went cold. I sat and watched some of the video footage that day. After I downloaded the software for the system, it took a while to find the company that made the system no longer supported it, and their newest software for the new system didn't recognize the hardware. Thankfully, tucked away on the edge of the internet on an abandonware server, I found a version intended for an older version of Windows, but worked thankfully the latest. It had problems in that the connection to the hardware would break at odd intervals, but I could see the video and hear the audio. I wished I didn't in the end, wished I just left it alone. The interface for the software presented a timeline at the bottom, list of cameras at the top. When the system had camera footage to show, then it would expand to show a play window. When it didn't, it shrank down to just a Windows title bar with the camera name. If more than 4 cameras were active, Then 4 would show footage, and the others would show a black screen and a prompt to click to view that camera's footage would then be displayed. And one of the 4 would stop. I rolled the slider through the initial footage that showed the police searching the house. Various camera lighting up as they went from room to room in the final footage, showing the back of a male officer as he pulled the plug on the system. Scrolling through, I found the start point of their last encounter together. The doorbell rang and my wife, who had been pacing around like a caged animal in the living room, went to answer it. The pair came into the living room. Have it being the first audio, it came from my wife. Of course, he told her, opening a child's Spider-Man book bag and producing a gun. The gun that had shot me. Seeing it caused me to feel the pain again that night. When I recovered, Sophie was talking him down quickly. I don't want him to suffer. Promise me you'll get close enough, and it'll be quick. As painless as it can be. Sweetie, I'm a ninja. Trust me. He won't hear me coming, and it'll be a single bullet to the back of the head. He'll be dead before he knows he's been shot. Enough talk. I expect some personal attention and affection before I leave. Any hope I had that somehow my wife had been innocent ended there. They started to kiss. Clothes got strewn all over the living room, and then she blew him for one load. Once he'd recovered, they moved from the sofa to my easy chair. I watched and I figured she'd got what she wanted and was done. But no, she had done more. I fast-forwarded through the rest of that encounter and found them in the shower together. Truly showering at first, then that too turned to sex. Finally, he left. I noticed by the time stamp, it was 10 p.m. Had he waited outside the building for 4 hours? The answer came from watching my wife. She sat on the sofa in the living room watching television. Around 11, Amelia turned up and went to bed. 130, the phone rang. It was me telling her I'd be leaving for home soon, and sure enough, she then called him and told him it was go time. I felt sick to my stomach then and there. She had just sent her lover to kill me, and did it as nonchalantly as she would have if she was ordering a pizza. At this point, I just scrubbed back through the timeline. Looking to confirm what the police told me that it was just him, I noticed they took great delight in having sex in places I considered mine. The marital bed, my easy chair in the living room, on my desk and chair in my home office down in the basement, and in the front seat of my car. That last one caught me by surprise. The only time Sophie had my car all year had been to take it in for a service for me, and she'd used that time to ensure she and her lover screwed in the car. After I'd finished, I knew I needed out of the house as soon as I could, and I needed a new car. I just couldn't bring myself to drive the one sitting in the garage. From that day, if I wasn't working or doing my rehab, I was boxing. I started with her clothes and her knickknacks. Once boxed, they got donated to the Salvation Army thrift store. I'd not been back in the house an hour that day when the phone rang. The old gentleman I'd offloaded my wife's things to called to tell me they'd found $100 in the jeans pocket and offered to send it to me. I told him to stick it in a donation box, theirs or another charity's. Once I felt I'd exorcised enough of her to make the house bearable until it sold, I made an appointment with a lawyer. The first meeting turned into a complete bust. With us not knowing where she was, we couldn't do a quick divorce. I wouldn't be 90 days then filing and waiting for the divorce decree. No, I had to look for her. I had to file for Freedom of Information Act records to see if any agencies could locate her. This despite an open investigation that was looking for her. I left my lawyer's office in a rage after having hit some inanimate objects and screamed blue murder at the world. Thankfully, he understood and allowed me to return. Tell him I'm sorry, and then have him start the work on the divorce. Summer holidays arrived and Amelia returned home. The house had finally sold. I had a new job. I'd be working for the evil empire, or the Borg as I learned other local professionals in Redmond call them. I had no idea what the project was that I'd be working on, just that the team I'd working with had been part of the group that created the Xbox Connect. The 3 trips out for interviews during the spring had been great. It offered a chance to see my daughter between holidays. It also brought me to Professor Susan Chicago, the daughter of a Namibian refugee. She had just taken a post at UW and had been in town to look for somewhere to live. She would be moving up during the summer from Los Angeles, California, looking to be settled in before the fall term started. We literally bumped into each other, me stepping off the elevator as she tried to step on. We laughed. She invited me down to the bar for a nightcap. I accepted, and also the invite later to go to her room with her. Susan was far more aggressive in the bed than my wife had ever been with me, and it made me feel alive. Next, I knew we were both naked on the bed, and she slowly impaled herself on my rigid member. Finally, exhausted, we collapsed side by side in comparisons to what I'd witnessed on the video of my wife, and her lover flooded my mind. Sophie had been meek and submissive with me and passionate and forceful with him. Susan had acted the same. I loved it, and it left me thinking about what could have been had Sophie just talked to me. I cried. Susan took it in her stride, comforted me, and then listened to my story afterwards. Talking into the night, talking until the orange light of dawn breaking flooded the hotel room. We then made love, slowly, with passion and a closeness that I'd felt only with Sophie before. We had breakfast together, then said our goodbyes. I headed to the airport, and a flight home that I slept through. She continued her search for a place to live. We'd exchanged contact information, and I was pleasantly surprised when we landed to see emails from her with pictures and details of the condos and houses she had seen that day. I found I was happy again, but that didn't last long. When I got to the house, Nora greeted me and immediately noticed a change in me. I told her about my trip, meeting Susan, and how we just clicked. Nora expressed her joy for me, then excused herself, saying she had a date with her boyfriend. She didn't come back to the house that night, or for the next 2 weeks, at least when I was there. The next day, she turned up late for work and immediately headed to HR. It took a week before I found out she'd given her 2 weeks' notice. The Saturday after her last day at the office, she showed up at the house and loaded up a small U-Haul trailer hitched to her care with her belongings and left. 2 weeks after that, the movers arrived and packed all my belongings. They would arrive in Seattle in a week's time. I spent my last night in the state at a hotel near the Pittsburgh airport. The board provided an apartment for the first month in town. While my stuff was transported and I finalized where I wanted to live, I ended up in a 3-bedroom apartment near Marymoor Park in Redmond. Susan had a small house on the other side of the park. We started to date, seeing each other a couple of nights each week. Sunday mornings, we'd go to the park and play in a pickup soccer game. I'm not afraid to admit that Susan made a fool of me and most of the other guys on that field. Dan, she was a good player. She was as cagey as the 60-year-old former professional and as fast as the university student. Only when they had the ball, he smoked her and sprints off the ball. Slowly, we both came to the realization that this wasn't going to last. She said someone else had my heart. I told her I was over my wife. The end came in the run-up to my first Christmas on the West Coast. Her way of ending it made sure there would be no way back. She made sure I caught her screwing one of her students in our house. Strike that, her house. I had started to think of it as ours, but she bought it, and she had been the only full-time inhabitant. I had had it with women. I wanted nothing more than to be left alone to get on with my life, watching out for my daughter, work, and finding new hobbies. On that note, I started to learn to ski up at Stevens Pass with the little free time I had. Working as a member of the board had not turned out to be something I enjoyed. One of their measurements of dedication was how long you remained at your desk. Not that you could leave, really, if you wanted to keep your job. The deadlines on everything were set so tight that massive amounts of overtime had to be put in just to meet them. But your progress inside the company was judged by what you did over and above your tasks, meaning you lived on campus. Since that day, 2 years ago now, when I got shot, I'd felt I was stuck in quicksand, slowly sinking in and watching my life go on around me, with no one helping me climb out. Sure, there had been moments when I felt like people had offered a stick to pull me out. Looking back, Nora had tried when I look back on it, But I hadn't been ready for help then, and Susan had almost pulled me completely free, then stomped on my head to force me back in. Early in the new year, I bought a house in Kirkland. The breakup with Susan pushed me into finally putting down proper roots of my own here. The house was a 4-bedroom place with a 2-car garage that was no longer a garage. In true startup fashion, the place had been turned into an office for his fledgling company. He'd failed. The bank had taken the home that he had inherited from his parents, and I'd bought it from them. The backyard had a small garden and a big pool in it. I didn't think I'd use it, but felt certain my daughter might. I'd settled in and unboxed everything that I had in my apartment. It looked empty, but next week that would change. I had hired some movers to recover everything I'd put into storage and bring to the house. That would fill out the house nicely, but I wondered what seeing the stuff from the old house would do to me. I worked Sunday, having taken Saturday off to move into the house. When I got home, blue Ford Focus rented from Enterprise stood in my driveway, parking on the street. I got out of my car staring at the one parked in my driveway. The driver's side door opened, and a pair of perfect legs encased in black stockings swung out. I knew the legs. I'd never been so enraptured by them before, though. Resolution. I continued to stare at the legs and the bottom of the owner's little black dress. I couldn't bring myself to look up into the owner's eyes, worried about her reaction to my staring and my second-hand show of appreciation. A cough, however. A distinctly male cough brought my eyes up. On the other side of the car, with a smirk on his face, stood Daniel. My eyes then switched focus from him back to Nora. She had a huge smile painted on her face. My mind raced. Had these two got together? Were they a pair now? And how come that idea made me feel so sad? I should be happy that my friends had found each other. William, God, I've missed you, Daniel said as he grabbed me for a hug. It's so good to see you up and moving around too. It's good to see you too, Daniel, I said, still unable to tear my eyes from Nora. She's missed you too, Daniel whispered to me. That got me to look at him. Quietly, I asked, are you two together? I wish. Boy, do I ever wish you would. He told me. What are you boys talking about? Nora asked. Nothing. We replied in unison. How's Susan? Nora asked me. No idea. We split up. Nora smiled at that. Good. She wasn't right for you anyway. Well, like the other bitch, she cheated on me. At least this parting didn't add any extra holes in me. Nora smiled again. You just need to let the woman decide you're right for her and not the other way around. Is that right? Would you know a woman that wants me? I asked. Her answer came in the form of her pressing herself to me and her kissing the living hell out of me. That minute, lifetime was only broken when I heard my daughter's voice calling out. It's about time, she screamed. Nora and I broke from our kiss, both of us panting to see Amelia with a huge smile on her face. A smile shared with Daniel, who stood beside her. Either he learned to teleport or our kiss lasted a little longer than a moment. What's with the dress? I asked Nora, ignoring the other two. My suitcase is in Chicago and some kid puked on my clothes on the plane. Given I'd come from an awards show to the airport, I had this in my carry-on. The pukey clothes are in a tied-off plastic bag in the car. Not sure if I should open it and clean them or give them a decent burial. Bring him in. I'll clean them for you. William, I need to tell you something. It's important, and it has to be before Daniel, and I tell you our other news. Okay, what is it? I love you, she said, her eyes searching mine. I've been in love with you since our first project together, but you were married. I wanted to say something when you woke up. Amelia told me I should, but I couldn't. Now I feel like I have to grab you up before I lose you for good. I love you. I told her, saying it just told me I did. It felt right. It felt like seeing my daughter for the first time. And a wise woman had recently told me that I should let the woman choose she had. Inside, I found out that Daniel and Nora had met in Chicago at the awards ceremony of a gaming conference there. Daniel had lined up financing, and he had been looking to build a team of people he could trust. Nora had gone to network. She needed a new job. They agreed they could work together. And thanks to Amelia, she knew I hated my job and would jump at a chance like this. So they jumped on the plane as soon as they could and came to see me. So Try This Games formed when I showed them my garage. Our office location was set. Daniel and Nora would move here to the state city and into my house. It had 4 bedrooms, one for me, one for Amelia, one for Daniel, and one for Nora. I hope that you're not offering me a guest room. Mr. Blackwood, Nora told me. I looked at her confused. Why wouldn't she want to live here? My daughter saved me. He just doesn't want to presume you'd want to move into the master bedroom, Nora. I looked at my daughter like she was an alien then, but it turned to a smile as my brain processed what she'd said. Nora, I would love to have you bunk with me. If you think you can handle me, that is. I got a punch on the arm, a nibble on my ear, and a whispered message. Oh, I can handle you. I'm sure of that. Are you sure you can handle me? I gulped. Everyone else laughed. Daniel left around 10 that night, looking to catch a flight back to the Bay Area and to date with HR in the morning. Then he began the process of relocating here. What flight are you on? I asked Nora as we watched Daniel drive off in the rented car. I don't have a flight. I bought a one-way ticket. She told me, smiling loudly, adding after a pause, I'll have my parents send my belongings here. We returned to the living room to find it empty and everything shut off. It's getting late. Bedtime. I asked Nora, as long as you don't expect to actually sleep. Nora told me, once we reached the bedroom, she veered off into the bathroom, and soon I heard the water of the shower running. I settled down to rereading it actually, the book I had on the bedside table. At this point in Heinlein's Time Enough for Love, the tale of Lazarus Long and brother and sister slaves was playing out. The water stopped some time later, and I was finding the book impossible to read. Minutes later, the door to the bathroom opened, and Nora stood there wrapped in a towel that covered her body. Good Lord, this woman was beautiful. From the pale blue, almost gray-painted toenails to the long flowing strawberry blonde hair on her head. I gulped, then licked my lips, struggling to find my voice given this visual assault on my brain. Strangely, one thing my brain noticed was that the towel matched her toe and fingernails. She was color-coordinated. I literally pinched my skin at that thought, then reached up to make sure my mouth was closed, and I wasn't drooling. Thankfully, I wasn't. Nora smirked at me, and then that turned into a full-blown laugh. Go take a shower. Maybe it'll bring you back to your senses. I nodded dumbly and slipped off the bed, stumbling when my heel caught the edge of my book. How on earth had that ended up there? I didn't remember it falling. As I passed her, I noticed she smelled of my shampoo and my soaps, and somehow that made her more beautiful and reinforced that she was mine, and I was hers. At the doorway, I turned back and kissed her on the neck, a gentle kiss filled with as much love as I could. She slumped against the doorway and groaned. Before continuing into the bathroom, I whispered, whose senses are overloaded now. I dropped my clothes on top of hers in the hamper, noting that my first come of the night had occurred. In my defense, God, she was beautiful in mind, body, and soul. I washed myself, finding the scents from the products, generating thoughts of Nora laid out on my bed. The heart on it generated had me feeling like a school kid again, with cock on a hair trigger. I switched the water to cold and gasped as the chill washed over me. Nora greeted me with a warm kiss as I entered the bedroom. She pulled away, taking my hand and guiding me towards the bed. Once there, she wrapped her arms around me, resting her hand on my chest. We both stood in the quiet comfort of the moment, fully embracing the intimacy. For the first time since everything had started, I felt truly at home. It felt more right than it ever had before, more real than I had ever felt with Sophie. I knew in that moment that Nora had completely let her guard down with me. We fell onto the bed, kissing and exploring each other's bodies, and it felt incredible. I focused only on her, Her taste, smell, feel, the noises she made. I did so in the certainty that she did the same for me. As our closeness grew, she let out a cry of surprise and joy, her emotions pouring out. I stayed focused, ensuring I matched her energy, providing what she needed to feel safe and valued. At one point, she grabbed my hand, pulling me closer, and we shared a moment of deep understanding. She spoke breathlessly. "I've never felt like this before. It's overwhelming in the best way." I chuckled and reassured her. "You've shown me something new too. This connection. It's incredible. This keeps the tone respectful and removes explicit elements while maintaining the idea of a strong emotional connection." "Come here," she said, laughing along with me. I moved closer, sharing a gentle kiss, feeling the warmth of her presence. Nora reached down and held my hand, smiling as she gazed into my eyes. "I think it's time we talk about this," she said. She leaned forward, guiding me to lie down comfortably, her smile radiating warmth and love. Her face glowed with joy, her hair slightly tousled, giving her a natural and captivating beauty. In that moment, I realized how much she completed me. Her presence was everything I needed. Her strawberry blonde hair framed her deep blue eyes perfectly, and her fair complexion was highlighted in the soft light. She was stunning, a vision of grace and elegance. She looked at me with a tender expression, her movements deliberate yet gentle, as if savoring every second of this shared moment. With an unspoken connection, we moved together in perfect harmony. Her touch filled with affection and care. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us in that perfect moment, connected in ways that words could never fully capture. Finally, at the peak of what could only be described as an unparalleled moment of shared intensity, I felt a powerful wave of accomplishment wash over me. Her triumphant cry of exhilaration matched my own. Both of us united in a shared harmony of achievement and unbridled joy. Nora then collapsed on me, banging her forehead into my nose, and the room filled with silence and calm. Just us panting, recovering, her body pressed against mine, our hearts beating in sync with one another, our sweat sealing us together. Slowly, we came down from our highs and drifted into deep, slow breathing as we slipped into a peaceful, contented sleep. I woke the next morning in the exact same position, which offered a real problem, because I needed to empty the tank, as it were. Lifting my head, I found myself looking into the deepest of blue eyes twinkling with joy and love. Nora smiled up at me, round two. "I'd love to, my love," I told her, "but I need to bleed the trouser snake first." She laughed and lifted herself off me. When I returned, we made love again, slow and passionate, then shared a shower before we re-entered society. Well, the breakfast table and my daughter. "He didn't kill you then?" "I almost called 911 at one point," she said with a smirk. With a stage whisper, she then asked Nora, "Was it all you hoped?" She kissed my daughter on the cheek, then whispered in her ear. From the huge smile that broke on Amelia's face, I can only assume I got a glowing report. Nora spent that day cleaning out the garage, preparing for Daniel, her and I to start working there. I went into the office and handed in my resignation. After I did that, a member of the HR department escorted me to my desk, where I picked up my personal belongings, a single photo of my daughter, and then she saw me to my car, opened the parking garage doors for me before she headed back to her office, and I headed home to help Nora. Answers. Later in the week, the stuff from storage arrived. We put the furniture in the appropriate rooms and stored the boxes in the spare bedroom that had been intended for Nora. Well, except for the ones marked as Amelia's. These went to her room. A couple of weekends later, Amelia came to me with one of her old laptops. "Dad, I can't seem to get into this computer. Can you help?" "Why on earth would you want to do that?" I asked, turning from the whiteboard that Nora and I had been using to brainstorm our next game's design. When I say whiteboard, I mean a whole wall of the garage that we'd wallpapered with special paper that made it a whiteboard. And the design? Well, it had used a large portion of it. "I want to know what's on it." I've not used this one since before you got shot. It might have something interesting on it. Okay, I said, walking to my desk. I then hunted through my drawers until I found what I was looking for. A green thumb drive. We put the drive into her computer's USB port and booted it. Windows started again. So we closed it down again, then rebooted. This time bringing up the computer's BIOS setting and adjusting it so as to boot from the USB drive first. A Linux-based recovery system booted. Then I manually mounted the 2 hard drive partitions in the system. The first contained the operating system, but the second showed itself to be encrypted. Using the recovery system, I reset the password on the admin account for the computer. We then rebooted the system and used the new password to access the computer. On the desktop, I saw something that made my stomach churn. I stared long and hard at my daughter before I spoke next. Amelia, did you install the camera system in our old house? What? She screamed. No. Why in the hell would you think that? I pointed to an icon. That's the software for the system. So I ask again, did you install the cameras? Or do you know who did? It wasn't me. Dad, if it was, she started then went silent. Hell, she screamed after being silent for a while. Oh God, that a hole. Who? Amelia? Ryan Carter. Why would you think it was him? Nora asked. I let him use that laptop to access the internet when he came around the house. She told her. I nodded at that, then turned to the computer and started the software. Pretty quickly, a dialog appeared looking for the encryption key to access the other hard drive. I canceled that dialog, and the software continued to load. But there was nothing to see. Everything had to be on the other drive. On a hunch, I opened the user control panel and reset Ryan's account password, then rebooted and logged in as him. It seemed I'd got lucky, or rather he was a complete idiot. On his desktop sat a file called notes.txt inside that a list of mundane things, like an appointment for the doctors from 4 years ago, a couple of adult website URLs with a username and password next to them. At least that's what I assumed them to be. The exciting bit, at least to me, sat at the bottom of the file. A string of alphanumeric characters. 26 characters long. I highlighted and copied the string, then fired up the software again. The normal system interface loaded, and where the camera windows would be was a simple message, no server found. So, there's nothing here? Amelia asked. This is the live interface. It can't find the server to connect to. There. Should. Be. I told them as I searched the program's interface. There it is. What is? Oh my. Amelia said as I clicked on the library option in the extras drop-down menu, and a series of thumbnails appeared. Below each thumbnail was a date and timestamp. 5 images per line. 3 lines on the screen and a scroll bar that indicated a lot more videos than the 15 showing currently. The top left video showed my former master bedroom. Standing naked at the foot of the bed was Amelia's former teacher. Sitting on the bed beside him, my former wife. The video beside it showed the pair in my daughter's bedroom. Next to that, another in our bedroom with everyone's favorite couple. The 4th actually contained me and Sophie. The 5th should show the former teacher and my former wife playing teacher and student in my office in the basement. She had pigtails and the uniform and everything. The other 2 lines had the same ratio, 4 of them. One of me and my wife. I scrolled down a page and saw the same thing. Same for the next few pages. In fact, then there was a series of videos of just me and my wife. I guess I now knew when the affair began. Scrolling down again, I was shocked to see Terry Mansfield, our next-door neighbors, show up in videos. The bitch was a serial cheater. I began rapidly scrolling down after that, spotting 2 other men with my former wife, including Liam Bennett with his wife Chloe. Liam had worked with us. He got fired for not putting in the same effort as the rest of us, or so I thought. Nora corrected me when she told us. He got fired when the owner caught his wife in bed with Chloe. The last few pages were had to see. Ryan's first collected videos were all of him and my daughter. But that slowly petered out, and his focus switched exclusively to my wife. "I'll call the police," I said to break the extended silence after I'd slammed the laptop screen down. Detective Ethan Hayes still had the same phone number, and though my wife's case had gone cold, he had an interest in trying to close it. He at least felt it offered him a fresh witness, one he remembered I'd asked him about when I'd woken up from my coma when they hadn't followed up on. He told us to leave it with him, and he'd get back to us. It took him a month. "Mr. Blackwood, is there any chance you can come back to Pennsylvania?" he asked after identifying himself break in the case. I questioned. "We found your wife. Ryan Carter is being charged with so many charges that he might set a state record," came the reply after a small pause. I looked around the garage-cum-office. Amelia, Daniel, and Nora had all stopped work and were looking at me. I should mention Amelia started to work for us via the co-op program at the university, and she wants to see me. I asked Mr. Blackwood. "The district attorney is choosing not to press charges against her." What I screamed. What moron wouldn't press charges against a woman that they had on video sending her lover to kill me? "Mr. Blackwood, she's not well enough to stand trial. She might not ever be well enough for that. The report we have says never, but I like to hope in what way you have to see for yourself. I really think it might be best if you came back and saw for yourself. Just prepare yourself for the worst." "Okay, detective, let me talk with my family, and I'll let you know." With that, I said goodbye and hung up. I then explained what he told me to the three people that now crowded around my desk. Nora and Amelia felt we should jump on the next plane out. Daniel told us to go, and he'd hold the fort. A week later, we followed the directions the detective gave and arrived at the state hospital. Reception directed us to the correct ward, and the nurse had us wait while she had the doctor page. The doctor took us into an office and began with a list of her physical injuries. She lost one eye, the left one, and broken her right leg, and had it heal wrong. They would need to break it again and reset it. Long-term malnutrition had caused some problems as well. That list was long enough when he got to his specialty. It grew much, much longer. The long and short of it. She'd been through long-term continual abuse. She has been treated as a sex slave, and all-around placing by a creep that had her with nothing but time to think to up and enact his every dream. Now she couldn't cope with being a free human being again. The doctor felt it would be many years before she would be able. Nora and I married a year after that trip to see my ex-wife. We married in Florida on a beach, not far from her parents' home. They welcomed Amelia as the daughter they always wanted. She loved having grandparents again. Well, for the first time because she didn't remember her natural ones. 6 months after we married, we found out that Nora was pregnant. The ultrasound showed twins, a boy and a girl. We've not settled on names yet, which is a little worrying given they are due next month. Our first game has proven to be a big success. Great retention numbers and a high lifetime value. They have the game on a monthly update cycle with the team we hired. Our second game is just about the Leave soft launch in Switzerland, South Korea, and Denmark. If returns during that match when go worldwide, we'll be expanding again. I've had to talk Amelia into finishing her degree a few times, given she'll be a paper millionaire soon, if she's not already there. I've not looked at the financials lately. Sophie lives next door to us, and Amelia insisted on stepping in to help. I couldn't refuse, especially since Amelia is Sophie's only remaining family. Sophie is making steady progress. Most days, we can encourage her to stay dressed all day, though we're not quite ready to take her out in public yet. Thankfully, the University of Washington has partnered with us. They're providing her treatment, and in return, I teach a game development class there. It's actually a win-win for me, as it allows me to scout and nurture potential future employees. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.